The Oklahoma Sooners are still being disrespected even after they land Dominic Williams through the transfer portal. None of the experts, none of the Vegas people believe Oklahoma can even really have a good shot at winning the SEC championship. It's pretty disrespectful to see who's actually above Oklahoma. And today we got to talk about it and discuss it. And I'm going to give you guys a way too early prediction of what I think Oklahoma can do in the SEC this upcoming season. But before we do that, guys, I need to hear from y'all, so make sure you're joining the discussion, jumping down in the comments below, giving me your thoughts on whether or not you think Vegas is right and the record that you think Oklahoma will go, your way too early record. But Vegas, they have not been favorable to Oklahoma since they've joined the SEC. If you guys remember, at one point, the line came out, and it was like Oklahoma at 6 wins, and then they moved it to 7. And 7-5, I think, is still pretty disrespectful. But somebody sent this to me the other day, and I thought, hold on. And it was the odds to win the SEC. And I was like, there's no way this is true. There's no way that Vegas is going to have certain teams above Oklahoma in the odds to win the SEC championship. Just not possible, right? Here, let's take a look at it. And I've got it pulled up here so you guys can see it. Some of you might want to go take these odds if you're a real gambler. Do not condone gambling, though, so don't get yourself caught up in anything. Obviously, Georgia's right at the top to win the SEC championship. The University of Texas at number 2. Let me say that again. The University of Texas is at number 2 to win the SEC championship. A team that lost a plethora of guys to the NFL draft, and their defensive back room has been depleted. Ole Miss at number 3? Really? Like, we haven't seen Ole Miss do it yet. Like, we haven't even seen Ole Miss consistently beat Alabama. They got Alabama at 4, LSU at 5. I think those are pretty respectable. I would have made an argument to put Alabama or LSU above Ole Miss, but Tennessee, Missouri, and Texas A&M above Oklahoma. I think anybody could probably make an argument for Tennessee. They've been in this conference. We've seen them compete at a high level. Missouri and Texas A&M. I get it. Missouri had a phenomenal season last year. One of the best seasons in their program history. You're telling me, though, that they're going to be better than Oklahoma in the SEC. And they have better odds to win the SEC by, plus 3,800? You're kidding me, right? They give Missouri a plus 1,200 odds to win the SEC. A&M plus 2,000 to win the SEC. You guys agree with me here, right? This is insane. And it's like this among multiple sports books. Now, the other sports books have them up plus 4,000, but you still have A&M and Missouri above Oklahoma. That's crazy. That's crazy. Like A&M, we don't even know what they're going to be. They lost a ton of 5 stars and a lot of talent to the transfer portal. And I'm sure Mike Elko will have that program at 7 or 8 wins. I don't think they can't be above Oklahoma, right? Here's what I mean by this. Here's why I think this is so disrespectful. Oklahoma, on their defense, are returning Billy Bowman, Peyton Bowen, Gentry Williams, Woody Washington, Kendall Dolby, Kenai Walker, Kip Lewis, Danny Stutzman, Ethan Downs. You're going to have Desan McCullough. You'll have Jaron Kanik, Dominic Williams, DJ Terry. You'll have Lole from the transfer portal. You'll have Des Malone, and you have R. Mason Thomas. That's a pretty good roster with a lot of snap count, a lot of experience, and you're telling me A&M's roster on the defensive side is better than Oklahoma's. You're telling me Missouri's roster overall is better than Oklahoma's. Because the offensive side of the ball, yeah, you're putting Jackson Arnold in as your quarterback. You're returning your 1A and 1B running back with a portal running back and a running back at Taylor Tatum, who everybody's really high on. You're bringing those two guys in along your 1A and 1B. You brought in probably one of the best wide receivers in the transfer portal this year. You've seemingly looks like you fixed your tight end position. And your wide receiver room is just as deep as it's ever been. Yet, they're going to give Oklahoma worse odds to win the SEC than Missouri and Texas A&M. Most of the other teams like Georgia, Ole Miss, Bama, LSU, Tennessee, I could make those arguments. I think Texas is still too high, especially with everything they lost. Again, you've got the media grabbed on to the Texas sack, and they're just swinging around on it because that's what they do. It's kind of disrespectful. But kind of want to go through and give you guys this early prediction of what I think Oklahoma can do. And this is going to be an early one. So I think it might change in the fall depending on what we see from development standpoints on the offensive line and defensive line throughout the summer and the fall. But without a doubt, your first 3 games of the season, Temple, Houston, Tulane, all 3 are at home. I think anybody would expect Oklahoma to go 3-0 in that spurt. You get Tennessee at home. I think Oklahoma is a better team than Tennessee. Tennessee, they're marching out Nico, sophomore quarterback. Jackson Arnold, he'll be a sophomore. I mean, I know Jackson, I think, is true sophomore. I don't know if they redshirted Nico, but at the end of the day, it's their second year. So both teams will have sophomore quarterbacks. I think that will offset each other. But overall, I think Oklahoma has better skill players, and Oklahoma is going to have the better defense in that game. So I'm going to pick, and especially since it's at home, I'm picking Oklahoma to beat Tennessee. So that's 4-0. Now, there are 2 games on the schedule this year that worry me a little bit. And the first one's against Auburn. Now, the good news is you don't have a game this year to set you up before Texas to overlook. You have to look at Auburn, and you have to consider them a threat. And you're going into Jordan-Hare, which is apparently a forsaken place. You're going to have to bring the Sage. I think this is going to be a really close game, but I like Oklahoma to pull it out because I don't think Peyton Thorne is going to be able to torch this Oklahoma secondary. And I think this will be the first real test for this defensive line. Now, Oklahoma versus Texas. Normally, I'd count this as a loss. But with everything Texas has lost this year, I think I'm pretty confident to say I'm going to pick Oklahoma to beat Texas. So by this point in the season, you should be 6-0 going into the back half of your schedule. South Carolina. Does anybody think South Carolina is going to be good? They're going to be bottom feeder of the SEC. Oklahoma's going to win that one. This is the second game that intrigues me a little bit. And a second game that makes me think, you could potentially lose it here. And that's going to be Ole Miss. I think this is probably a game Oklahoma loses on the schedule. I think going in to Oxford, Mississippi, Lane Kiffin's going to have that team riled up, ready to go. I think this is probably the most talented Ole Miss team that they've had. I think Oklahoma loses that game. But they come back the next week against Maine, where I think maybe you see a quarter where your starters are playing, but you don't see guys like Billy Bowman, Danny Stutzman, Woody Washington, or any of those guys out there. I think you're going to see the starting. You'll get Jackson Arnold and then to start the game. And then second quarter, I think you put in your second string and third string guys and really let them grab some experience. Let those true freshmen get a full game under their belt, but keep them under the 4-game level they need to be redshirted, right? That's what I think happens. And I think Oklahoma obviously runs away with that because it's Maine, right? You shouldn't struggle against Maine. But try to get out of that game healthy. Oklahoma at Missouri. I think Missouri's asking for an ass kicking, and I think it's going to happen. I'm just going to call it now. I think Oklahoma wins by that game by 35 or more points. I think it's going to happen. I think Oklahoma is just more physical in the trenches on both sides. The Caden Green acquisition for Missouri it helps them a lot. I don't think it helps them enough because you're going to be able to cycle out your best defensive lineman on Caden Green, who will likely be their best offensive lineman, right? So cycle out your best against their best and push them around a little bit. You know what Caden Green's capable of. This staff knows his strengths and his weaknesses, and I think they'll play to that. So I think Oklahoma wins that game by 35. So at this point, you are 9-1. You got your last 2 games. Bama at home LSU, and I believe SEC, ESPN, they're going to want to give Oklahoma and Texas not only tough opponents, but they want to give them probably the toughest times to play these opponents. So Auburn game, I believe, probably be a 2:30 game. Ole Miss, I think, will be like a 5 or a 6 o'clock game. And LSU, I think, is prime time 7 or 7:30. Against Alabama at home, no Nick Saban. Alabama's kind of lost a lot. I think they're going to be better this year on their offensive line. I'm curious to see how the quarterback position works, but I think by this time in the season, Oklahoma is going to be very seasoned. They will be ready to play Alabama, and since it's a home game, I am projecting Oklahoma will win all of their home games this year. They will defend home field, so I think they'll beat Bama. But this LSU game at Death Valley, again, I think it's a primetime game, 7:30. I think Oklahoma loses this. It's a very tough environment. And I would love to watch us go in there and win. And if we do, that puts us at 11-1. I don't think Oklahoma has more than 2 losses this year, especially now with the acquisition of Dominic Williams. But LSU is going to be an extremely tough place to play. They look really good at the quarterback and the offensive line position. I'm curious to see what their wide receiver looks like this year with losing a couple guys. But I think LSU is going to be ready to go. I think everybody's going to question their defensive line. I think that's going to be the biggest question. If that does not look good, Oklahoma is going to have a shot in that game. But I think LSU is going to be a problem for Oklahoma, especially if it's a primetime game in Death Valley. If it's like an 11 or a 12 o'clock game in Death Valley, I would definitely change my tune to that. And again, I think some of these predictions might change as we get to the summer and the fall and we find out more about these teams and what Oklahoma is going to look like. I just wanted to give you guys an early prediction. But at 10-2, I think Oklahoma makes the playoffs, probably not getting home field advantage. So, or not home field, a top 4 seed. So they're not getting the bye week. They'll probably get home field, which means, hey, you and me as an Oklahoma fan, we get to watch a playoff game in Norman, meaning we're going to get an opponent that we probably don't see. Gosh, I really hope it's Oregon. That's what I really want. But we'll get to see something like that in Norman. And then I think this is the year Oklahoma gets their first round playoff win. From there, I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'll just at least project one playoff round win for Oklahoma there. So that's kind of what I think, guys. I wanted to give it to you. So make sure you guys are joining the discussion, jumping down to the comments below, giving me your thoughts. And if you guys have not already and you guys have made it this far, go ahead and hit that like and hit that subscribe button.